Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution? Or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical sexologist Dr. Martha Tar Lee will explore all these and more on Eros Evolution on Home Times Radio.
Hello, and welcome to Eros Evolution. This is where sexuality and spirituality meets. My name is Martha. I'm a clinical sexologist with a doctorate in human sexuality, and I'm from Eros Coaching. That's eroscoaching.com. And this show, we have different guests in different capacities, talking about, of always, the link between sex and spirit. And today, I have a very different guest with a different topic, and she is my senior, and she's very well accomplished in her field. I often see her being cited in the media, and today's topic is why my husband wouldn't have sex with me. So as the title suggests, this would be for people who are in long-term relationships. So this is a very taboo subject, and this is also the title of her book, Why My Husband Won't Have Sex With Me. And it's a silent growing epidemic. Society dictates that a man should always want to have sex with his wife, and when he does not, instead of looking at the whole picture, the woman is often the one who gets blamed. Dr. Michael will be sharing with us today her approach to this problem and explains in her book also, giving reasons why this happens and how to fix it. She has another book that was launched earlier this year, and it's called The Ultimate Intimacy Guide for Passionate People, which is a follow-up book that was just released. So it's a workbook, and you can buy them separately or together. So a little bit more about today's guest, Dawn Michael. She has a Bachelor of Arts Communications, MA, Masters of Arts in Marriage Family Therapy. She has a PhD in Human Sexuality. She's a certified hormone specialist, certified sexuality counselor with American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. She's an advisory board member and certified sexologist of American College of Sexologists and a member of Society for the Scientific Study of Sexuality. She's a co-owner of the Sexual Health and Wellness Center with her partner, Ramos, who's MD, medical doctor, and she's a public speaker and educator providing information on male and female sexual health issues along with better sex techniques for couples. So promoting healthy and sex-positive views is one of Dr. Michael's passions for working with her clients. So as you begin to know, she's an author, she's a featured guest of national television, radio, and magazines, and we're very happy to have her here today. So her website for you guys to check out is thehappyspouse.com. And you can also find her on Facebook groups under Intimacy Counseling with 1L, and Twitter, Sex Counseling with 1L. So welcome to today's show, Dr. Dawn Michael.
Hi, Martha. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So you've worked with couples in different kinds of capacity for 20 years. Would you like to tell us more how you got into helping people specifically with sexuality?
Yes, I started out as a marriage counselor, and while I was completing my internship, I also worked at a psychiatric hospital and other areas too. But I started to take over my father's business, which was interior design. And so what I did is I combined the marriage counseling with interior design, and I started to create couples interior design counseling. And that, of course, led into wanting to have a sexy bedroom, a romantic bedroom, and obviously we started talking about sex. And I found along the way that a lot of the problems that people were having in their marriage were due to sexual problems, and they just didn't know how to communicate or have the tools. And I wanted to go back and learn more about it, and that's when I got my my certifications and my PhD in human sexuality. And here I am today.
Wow. So in your practice, you still work with couples, right? For like couple counseling if they require.
Yeah, what I do in my practice is I will see couples or individuals, and each person that comes in, I spend 80 minutes with them in the beginning, and I do a full sex history. And from that sex history, I will decide what type of treatment they need. And working with a medical doctor is wonderful because if I feel that perhaps they're having a hormone issue or it's something that is not entirely psychological, I can have them checked out and then have them come back and be able to proceed. So that's been a very big benefit. And for the most part, with couples, after meeting, we will do my intimacy practices, which is now in my book, The Ultimate Intimacy Guide for Passionate People, so that people can do it at home, what I do in the office with my couples.
Mm. So it's very rare to meet somebody who has specialization in hormones. So you're a certified hormone specialist. Tell us more about that as well, please.
Well, if I have a man or a woman come in and they are talking about not having desire or lack of desire, I want to know, could this possibly be hormone related? And I will ask them more questions before I ask them to see the doctor. But if it does seem as though it could be hormone related, it's really important that they have their hormones checked because it does affect desire. It affects, in women, vaginal wetness, and it affects how somebody feels. I've noticed in men that if they have really, really low testosterone, they sometimes present themselves as being depressed or anxious. And so it's always good to have someone have their health checked out.
Yes, definitely. So one of the things that I learned when I was doing my training to be a sexologist is that we cannot just keep working and talking with clients without making sure that the medical side, the physical side is being covered. So definitely a hormone check is one of the things to consider in working with a client.
It's absolutely a valid thing, and what I've run into is some people will go and get their hormones checked, and they may have a little bit more testosterone, and they may need estrogen, and then all of a sudden they're feeling desire, but then they don't know what to do in their marriage because they haven't felt desire. And what I try to do is work with the community as well, saying, listen, if you are working with people and you are putting them on hormones, they really need to have the counseling along with it as far as a couple goes so that they can learn once again how to be intimate with each other.
Yes, I agree. It's true. And it can be really confusing because the way they feel may not necessarily translate to actions. And that can be some kind of a block that can happen from not having had sex for a long time. So let's dive into the today's topic proper. Why my husband wouldn't have sex with me? There must be many reasons why couples stop having sex. So what are some of the things that you have experienced in your work?
So I think that most people can relate to, in a relationship, a long-term relationship, one or the other person not being sexual. And so I think in many relationships there's mismatched sex drive. And most of the time it's looked upon that it's the man who is initiating this, but there are many times when it's the woman who is feeling like her sex drive is not matched with her husband. And in fact, she may want to have sex more often than him, but being turned down, she's going to put it upon herself most of the time rather than see that it could be a relationship problem or that he could be the cause of some of it.
So tell us more relationship problem.
Well, I have in my book different chapters, and a big one, obviously, is when somebody has a child or somebody is pregnant. And so I go into a whole chapter about pregnancy and childbirth and how this can really affect a marriage on both sides, and how both men and women can work through some of the issues they're having surrounding the pregnancy, the birth, and also raising children.
Yes. So that's a big one, because it's a huge transition to their life, and it can be really destabilizing. There are people that I know of, they don't have sex for the full 9 months of pregnancy, and it really does a number on when they try to resume sex, because they get into some kind of a comfort zone.
Absolutely. And there's so many issues that I have seen that revolve even around pregnancy or getting pregnant. I've worked with some people who are not able to get pregnant, and part of this, the sex, it becomes forced, and sometimes there's for the men, some anxiety and performance anxiety that can happen even at that juncture that carries on into the marriage that doesn't get resolved sometimes.
Yes, very true. So these are some of the things that are covered in your book, and we're gonna have a break very soon. I'm just very curious, what are the other topics that are also in your book besides having a child, pregnancy, and raising children?
Oh, absolutely. I will lay out the rest of it here.
Cool. So we're with Dr. Dawn Michael, and she's on the happyspouse.com.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hi, I'm Kelly Fox, host and astrologer of The Astrology Show. Each week, I'll give you access to the current transits, which are a valuable tool that provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has. Understanding the stars can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, be sure to tune in to The Astrology Show for guidance, Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Every 2 minutes, an American is sexually assaulted. The majority of victims know their attacker. It could be your friend, your neighbor, or someone you met at a party. If you said no, it's rape, and it's a crime. This is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Call the National Sexual Assault Hotline today at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit RAIN.org. That's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
And you are listening to Eros Evolution on the Om Times Radio Network, and you can share the show with your friends by going to the link omtimes.com/mobile, and you can listen to the show. So this is Martha. I'm a sexologist from Eros Coaching, and today I'm very, very privileged and honored to have my colleague and senior and well-accomplished sex counselor and marriage family therapist here on today's show, and she's none other than Dr. Dawn Michael. She's released 2 books over the last 2 years, last year and this year. The last year being My Husband Won't Have Sex With Me, and earlier this year, The Ultimate Intimacy Guide for Passionate People. Both are available on Amazon. Just before break, we were beginning to start talking about how first I asked her how she got into this work, and then later we started to talk about some of the possible reasons why sex stops happening in marriages. And the first one being when trying for baby and the struggles of raising children. So these are big life changes that happens. So what are some of the other possible reasons couples stop having sex? Dr. Don Michael?
Oh, yes. So I outlined several chapters, and in the chapters I go to the subheadings. And so obviously one of them I have as affairs of the heart and affairs, and they really are categorized in two different ways. This may be one reason that a husband is not wanting to have sex with his wife. If you want to jump into that one, I've got a couple more I can bring up too.
Yeah, that's good.
So
we can do it however you like. You like to.
Well, I'll name a couple of the things that we go over, and then we can kind of pick through it because it is the whole entire book, and there's a lot of information there. So we talk about the affairs of the heart. We also talk about men having a loss of desire, and that could be psychological, or that can also be performance anxiety, or it can be a medical issue. And I get into that quite a bit. I also talk about what if your husband is gay or he, has problems with his sexuality. That's another reason. And another one that is at the end of the book, which is interesting, is that the marriage has expired. And that is when the marriage really is over. How do you know when the marriage is over and when to stop trying? So I have a whole chapter on that. Then we get into drugs and alcohol and the way a woman feels about herself, how she approaches her husband. And in the book also, this came from an article that I wrote several years back that was getting millions of views and comments on the topic. And I had actual comments from both men and women in the book who are in this type of a marriage and what they're going through.
Wow. So yeah, there's so many. I guess it would be awesome if you could elaborate more on each of them.
Let me, I'm going to add one thing into this, which is the running theme that I have throughout the book. And there's this part where women in society, I think, feel as though they can't talk to their friends, or they really can't talk to anybody about the fact that their husband may not want to have sex with them, because it is a very taboo topic still, which is surprising, but it is. I think there's a lot of shame associated with it, and shame is what really keeps these women in the marriage. And so I really created this book for these women to outline what some of the reasons are that their husbands may not want to have sex with them, or they may not be attracted to them. And I also give solutions to each one on what to do if they're found in this particular relationship. And if you think about it, it's really very painful, a very painful thing when you continue to ask your husband or try to do things to have sex with you, and he just, won't talk about it or makes up an excuse. And so many of the comments really pertain to that, this idea that, what do I do? What do I do? And I don't know if you have seen this in your practice, or if you've, I think that it's something that I think is coming about more and more, because I think women are openly talking about it, but I'm not sure if where you're at, if you see this as well.
Yeah. So it's very common, and there's a lot of blame actually on the men when they won't have sex. This misconception that perpetuates through society that men should always be ready for sex, men should always be horny, they're not allowed to be tired because they are animals. And so when the tables are turned, sometimes it's very surprising for the women, and it's hard for them because culturally also sex is something that's not really being talked about so much, and so it's very difficult for them to also discuss it with their partners. And so when they do talk about it, it can come across very forceful, and it's exactly what you were talking about here, how she approaches her husband. And the approach is also very important because, it can cause like withdrawal and like shutdown and all that. So yeah, I agree with all the things that you've mentioned.
And I agree with the concept of approaching and the way a woman approaches a man, but I think it goes even deeper than that, because for men, and I counsel a lot of men, and I also ask them, what are their opinions on certain things and how do they feel about sex. And a lot of men say that a woman may not understand if he doesn't want to have sex, that perhaps he's tired, or that some men have performance anxiety, or there's parts of aging or stress, and that a wife may not understand if they say no. They also feel this pressure that that they have to perform on command. And I think a lot of this is in sex education. I mean, nobody really tells us when we're younger, we don't really learn it in school, that men are not always ready to perform, men are not always ready to have sex. And in fact, a lot of men, as they age, they need more mental stimulation, they need more direct penile stimulation. And also, if they are not performing in the bedroom and a wife maybe really doesn't know how to help him perform or get over that anxiety, it just kind of snowballs. And that's one of the things I write about in the book, too, in a chapter, and how a man can have this performance anxiety, and it really can grip him with fear. And that is a big problem in some marriages.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's okay. So I was going to say that what I feel really usually happens is that in heterosexual relationships where the men most of the time they tend to be less expressive, less verbal, and they also don't show much in terms of physical appearance or verbal communication, and therefore it creates this misconception that because they don't seem to feel as much, that they don't feel as much. Exactly what you mentioned, that their inner and external seems to send off the message like they don't care or they're not affected, but in reality it's not true. They actually become more stressed as time goes by, and they do feel a lot.
And one of the important factors in that, in working with couples, and also in the second book that I wrote, the guidebook, what it does is it teaches both men and women how to communicate about sex. Because if they can have an open communication and they feel comfortable with each other and given the proper tools, which a lot of people don't have, then they are able to communicate how they can help each other, what's going on in their mind, because most couples think that they know what's going on, or they make up their own story about what the other person is thinking, and it's usually wrong. It's usually not what the other person is thinking. And that's a big thing when I'm working with couples, to say, hey, you really have to ask someone, what are you thinking? And sit back and listen instead of coming up with your own idea of what you think they're thinking, because that creates a whole other issue.
Precisely. So there's this whole thing about story that I have my clients go into as well. There's this second guessing. They come up with A is happening and B and C, and so therefore it must be this. So you're right that this story just doesn't serve them at all.
And if you think about it, it's even worse when it comes to sexual stuff. It's even harder for people to approach that. And so sometimes it's easier to go, okay, I'm just going to try to figure out what they're thinking because I'm too embarrassed to say something. And I have found this with couples that have even been married for a longer period of time, that they almost think that they should know each other so well sexually. And the reality is, as we age, our bodies change and our minds change, and nothing is the same as when we were in our 20s, 30s, 40s. We change. And so without having this open communication, how are we really going to know what the other person likes if we don't try something new or ask something different?
Precisely, like not trying certain things that was done maybe like 5 years ago, and the person that you are with now is a different person and has different attitudes. And so time has passed and the person has changed, and there's this like assumption and also certain projections that is being made for people, and this can actually add more stress.
Absolutely. There's another part where I can get into more, but I'll just preface it right now. It has to do with, I get into the idea of pornography in my book too, and I look at it more of as a sexual pattern and how it relates to somebody before they got married. And so all people have a specific sexual pattern before they get married. And this can stay with them, or it does usually stay with them after they get married to a certain extent. And so if somebody is watching pornography and masturbating before they get married, then it's more likely than not that they're going to be doing it, after marriage.
Yes.
And so what happens is...
Yeah. So we'll come back and continue this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
What's up? This is Brad and Mike from Lincoln Park for Life Beat, the music industry fights AIDS. Listen up, times are tough and you get a lot of things thrown your way. If you're being pressured to have sex and you're not ready, then say no. If you're having sex, be smart and use protection. Respect yourself and protect yourself.
For more information, call the National AIDS Hotline at 1-800-342-AIDS or log on to www.lifebeat.org.
Hi, and welcome back to Eros Evolution. Today we have the topic of why my husband wouldn't have sex with me. And let me read to you the synopsis of the book. So today's show title is of the same. Today's show title is Why My Husband Wouldn't Have Sex with Me, but the book title is My Husband Wouldn't Have Sex with Me. And women have often been portrayed as difficult partners who deny their spouse sex, and this cannot be further from the truth. So this book will bring to light the agony of women who are at their wits' end when their red lips, sexy lingerie, and soft lingering touches no longer work magic on their husbands. From pregnancy, childbirth to sexual dysfunction and pornography abuse, So leading clinical sexologist and relationship expert Dr. Dawn Michael leaves no stones unturned as she lends a voice to those who are trapped in a sexually frustrating relationship. So this is the synopsis of the book. And just before break, we were already starting to explore all the different possible reasons why couples stop having sex. And she was just explaining more about the role of pornography before the break. So would you like to continue to elaborate more on that?
Yes, and so there's a couple different parts to pornography. The first part that I was trying to say is sometimes when couples are in a relationship for a long period of time and the sex gets boring or they're not stepping up their sex life, many times a man will turn to pornography, or if they're just not having sex as often, he may be watching pornography, or he may just be watching pornography because it's part of his sexual pattern. And this is something that does play a part in, why my husband doesn't want to have sex with me. And oftentimes a woman doesn't know how to approach this particular topic concerning porn. And many of the women have said that they actually feel like, they're competing with another woman, but they're really not. It's something that the man is watching. And in the book, I get into a deeper explanation of what a woman can do if her husband is into this, why he's into it. There's many reasons why, and how the couple can work together to kind of overcome some of this and have a better sex life. So
that's.
I'm sure that you've heard this in your practice too, right?
Yeah, because they get really upset with it when they catch their husbands watching porn, and they accuse him of not being sexually attracted to her anymore. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so let me jump back to what I was talking about before the break. Often when couples, before they get into a marriage or long-term relationship, they already have their own sexual pattern. So a man may already be watching pornography and masturbating to it before he ever gets married. And this really becomes a part of his sexual release, how often he's masturbating. Once a couple gets married, usually the sex is pretty good in the beginning, and they may be having sex frequently, and he may not be watching pornography. But oftentimes, with life, with stress, with kids, sex gets put on the back burner for many couples for various reasons, and a person will go back to their sexual pattern. And it's the same thing for a woman too. I mean, she'll go back to what her sexual pattern was before meeting her husband, but typically in this particular instance, he'll go back to his, which is the pornography, and she may not. What happens is, while he's watching pornography, his mind is expanding sexually. So he's seeing all these different things and maybe trying, fantasizing about these things, and she may not be doing that. And so what happens is their excitement about sex and their ideas of sex, it changes over time mentally. So he may have this expanded sexual view, and she may not. And so he may be getting bored with the sex, and he may not be able to express to her what he would like to do sexually. And so if this is the case, what I recommend is that a wife, instead of, catching him watching porn and being upset about it, to ask him, what turns you on? What do you like about it? And trying to be open so that he brings her into the conversation rather than shutting her out. Because when she gets shut out, that's the end of the conversation. And if he feels like she's going to shut him out, he's just going to hide it even more. So I really do go into a lot more detail in the book on this. I could spend probably a whole entire hour talking or more about this particular topic, but there's a lot more in the book that goes into what you can do to change the sexual patterns and stuff like that.
Yes. So it is impossible for us to cover everything that is in a book in 1 hour. So I definitely encourage listeners to get these books. So Dr. Dawn Michael has been in practice for more than a decade. She's been working with couples for over 20 years, and in different capacities. So I have no doubt that this book will be really invaluable. She didn't just write these books, after 1 year of practice. She did this like after 20 years of working with people. So I really like what you're saying about the link, and I can see the kind of like the flow or the logic in this, and it's so beautiful how you articulated it, and I'm actually getting new insights from you in being able to better explain this to my clients in future. So I'm just going to try to repeat this back. So what you're saying is, if there's a sexual pattern of watching porn, this may continue after marriage, very logical. And so as things get stale in a long-term relationship, which does happen, and he goes back to watching porn, for instance, his mind is expanded, he's getting bored, he's not expressing himself, and so she's not thinking about sex, and not in fantasy, and not thinking about having more sex. And so if she catches him watching porn, and starts shaming him or shutting him down, he would actually hide more, and things would actually get even worse. So I really like how you articulated this. Yeah, so thanks for that. Hello?
Yes, no, I mean, that is how you summed it up, and that's exactly right. And that was one of the points, is what do you do when you get to that point? So, yeah, and it's not something that's going to go away. It's something that's going to continue to happen in society right now, and it's something that we have to deal with. Both men and women have to deal with. It's just something to say, and there's certain aspects about it that can be positive, and certain aspects about it that are negative as well. So it goes hand in hand.
Go on.
What I was going to say about expanding the mind erotically, this is actually not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if a couple can do this together and expand their mind erotically together, like maybe they're talking about their fantasies, which is something I recommend in my book, exploring erotica together. If there is a film that they want to watch, both of them, it's something that they can do to spice up their sex life. All of these are things that are productive and are promoting intimacy, and that's really basically what you want to do, is promote the intimacy, the sexual intimacy, so that you're experiencing it together in the relationship.
So important.
And
so yeah, go ahead.
What I was going to say is the other part that I point out in the book, and I tell this to my clients all the time, is everybody is responsible for their own pleasure. And this means that if you're not getting pleasure when you're in the bedroom with your partner or your husband or a spouse, you have to take responsibility into your own hands. And literally, I tell women to masturbate often, so that they get to know their own body, so they're aware how to turn themselves on. And then they can show this to their husband once they're in the bedroom. And some men, they really need that extra help. They need to know what turns their wife on, and that turns them on too. So I think it's really, both people need to take responsibility for their own pleasure in a relationship.
Yes, I agree with you. And like you mentioned, in your second book especially, you provide communication tools for couples. And the book is The Ultimate Intimacy Guide for Passionate People.
Yes, I do. I outline a whole bunch of different techniques in my second book, which is great. It's something that I use in my office, and it's a program that I've developed. I'm going to be producing a video series for it so I can have classes available too. And so that's something that you can pick up now, and hopefully I'll have that in the future.
Beautiful. So earlier you mentioned that there are times when the marriage has expired and couples actually should call it quits. So when do such situations happen? I would really appreciate it if you could just elaborate a little bit on that.
Absolutely. So this is something that, when you have a private practice, as I'm sure you do, you will see couples come in, and you have to go through several things with them. And part of what I do is I have them do many touching exercises, because you can talk about the same problem over and over again and not really get it resolved. But if you can get the couple to start touching again, some of the problems can get resolved. But what I've found is there are some couples that just are resistant, number one, to going through the practices. So that's a red flag for me right there. They don't want to do the practices. They're not really interested in making the marriage better. And so, I have a chart for them. I say, this is the middle where the two of you compromise on things. And it seems like neither one of you is interested on compromising or working in the relationship. Or you may have it where one person is doing all the work and then the other spouse is doing none of the work. And that's also another instance where you have to say to yourself, okay, I have tried everything, but my partner just is not willing to work on this relationship. And sometimes they'll use excuses, about having kids, about religion, about being afraid to go out. And as those are valid excuses, to some extent, you want to make sure that you really work on it. In the end, if you really are not having a working relationship and it's causing you more physical health, mental pain, then this is the time for you to get out of the relationship. Because I have seen some women where their health is just...
Yeah, their health is just affected.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, yes, we have a break, and we'll come back and wrap up with Dr. Dawn Michael. And you can find her at thehappyspouse.com.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Julie Geigel.
And I'm Susan Schuler.
And I'm Lori Walker.
And we are
the Psychic Angel Channelers
from Angel Talk Tuesday.
Tune in every week at 10 a.m. Eastern on OmTimesRadio.com.
The angels have heard your call and are here to help.
Are you ready to receive?
Bathe in the beautiful vibrational frequency to help you heal, expand, and remember your magnificence with Angel Talk Tuesday.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
To get in the way before it happens.
To get a friend home safe.
And to not blame the victim.
It's on us.
To look out for each other.
To not look the other way.
It's on us to stand up.
To step in.
To take responsibility.
It's on us, all of us,
to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
And this is the last 15 minutes of today's show. And on every episode of Eros Evolution, I always ask my guests, if I remember, sometimes I forget, the link between sex and spirit for them. So Dr. Dawn Michael, what do you see is the link between intimacy and spirit?
I think that if two people are spiritual in a relationship, and we can talk about spirituality, we can talk about religion, because different people have different views on what spirituality is.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that if a couple has a spirituality between the two of them, that it can make the intimate connection deeper if you can bring that into the relationship.
That's true.
So
That's definitely true.
So when asked about spirituality, I always like to say, explain the idea of spirituality. Like, what would you say is the spirituality?
Yes. So you ask them to define it for you, and then you explore whether there is a connection between the two of them.
Right, because everybody, I think, sees spirituality differently, and I think it can be unique to a person and unique to a couple.
Yes. That's great. That's beautiful. So, yes, just before the break, you were interrupted with you were elaborating more on marriage expired. So, is there anything you want to tie up the loose ends before our show ends today?
Just with what I was saying about the marriage is expired, is I think that people should be aware of how the relationship is affecting their health. Because when it gets to a point where it's making you sick, like physically sick, because there's so much stress in the relationship, you can't take back your health. I mean, that's something that is, you can't replace that. And so if you are putting yourself in a very unhealthy situation or even a dangerous situation, you really need to get out of the relationship and get some support. Definitely get support. That is so important in trying to get out of an unhealthy situation.
And of course, to also get support by seeing a mental health professional or a marriage counselor or sexologist, and not try to do it all by yourself. Because I think what happens is couples get into some kind of a cycle, and they don't really know how to break out of it because they don't necessarily have the skills to navigate that.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And in the book, I do point out I give a list of things that says, okay, if you are going through this, and this, it might be time to get some help to try to resolve some of the issues or get out of the marriage.
Yes, great, fantastic. So I really like all the things that you're sharing today. Is there any advice that you have for listeners? They've heard a little bit of like all the possible reasons. What advice would you give them?
As far as this topic goes, I think that what I would leave everybody with today is when you enter a marriage, you do so where you're excited about being with that person, you're excited about being intimate with them, and they are your first priority. And I think what happens in long-term relationships is the marriage, the sex, it really is not the first priority. And I just think reevaluating your relationship from time to time is very important in long-term relationships.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying about at first they are priority, then later on they are not. And so this is a good time to reevaluate. Sometimes we lose sight of why we even are with that person, take each other for granted, for instance, get into some kind of the same kind of cycles, and there's more and more baggage. And so this can happen where the passion is not there, and therefore needs reevaluation, like you said.
Yeah, reevaluate, check in with your partner, check in with yourself, because, you both chose to be in this relationship together. And so if you can put your best foot forward and try to move in a positive direction with your partner and get help if you need help. Don't be afraid, because this really is a big part of your life, a relationship, a marriage. And so you would get help in other areas of your life, and I think people just neglect getting help when they're struggling in their relationship.
Yes. I can see how your book would really flesh out all those issues and the details of each one of them, so people can have more of an appreciation. So you mentioned that the first book would do that, My Husband Wouldn't Have Sex With Me, and then the second book is a follow-up workbook, The Ultimate Intimacy Guide for Passionate People. And so for those of you who are interested, I just want to do a shout out first before we get cut off as the show starts to wind down. So you can be part of Dr. Mike's growing Facebook page, Intimacy for Passionate People, along with updates on her website, thehappyspouse.com, where you can purchase her 2 books, or you can also buy them from Amazon.com. And she has a Facebook group, Intimacy Counseling, one word, and you can follow her on Twitter, sexcounseling.com. So, like I mentioned, she's been working with couples in different capacities for 20 years, and these 2 books were launched last year and this year. And so I would believe that with her credentials and the what she knows, that this is the very best of her work that is being presented. So yeah, for people in long-term relationships interested in this topic, I strongly suggest that you get both of her books.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it and having the conversation with you. And I would love to talk further at another point. This has been great. It's a great thing that you're doing, educating people on sexuality. I think we need more of it, much more of it.
Yeah, and you're doing amazing work. I see you mentioned many times in the media and magazines that I follow. Like I saw you recently on was it Bustle?
Bustle. Yeah, I've been in Bustle.
Yeah.
I've been in Cosmopolitan magazines, which has been fun. I've done a couple little articles in there, which is great. I've been all over the internet, Self magazine, Glam, all the major magazines, Bustle, probably some of the ones that you've probably done as well, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the most recent one that I saw you in. Yes. So yeah. So thank you so much for coming on, and I'd love to have you come back in the future.
Great. It was great. I had a good time, and thank you for all your insight and your questions and everything as well.
Thank you very much. So for next week, we have Sean Love, and it's really interesting because have had on this show sex workers, and I have had people who wrote a book on sex work, but this would be the first time next week where I have a male escort coming onto the show. So he's a professional male escort in UK, and he has this what he calls conscious kink, and we'll be talking about the importance of understanding and integrating our erotic shadows. So like I mentioned, he's a male escort, and he works with intimacy, erotic ritual, tantric sex, and all forms of sacred sexuality and sensuality. So using this combination of touch, sensuality, embodiment helps his client to live more fully in their bodies as a whole, to be integrated, sexually empowered beings. And I actually started to first follow his work when he won the title of Sex Worker of the Year in 2015's Sexual Freedom Awards that was happening in the UK. So yes, I've been very interested, very curious about him. And so next week the show title is going to be The Sacred Shadow. And if you are interested to have access to every single episode of Eros Evolution, you can go and do a quick Google search, Eros Evolution at a glance. And from there you go to a link which leads to my website, and you can basically scroll up and down to have access to every single episode since then. And if you have any feedback for me, any guests, any books, anything that you want to ask me questions, feel free to drop me an email, and you can email me at drmarthalee@eroscoaching.com. I'd love to hear from you how I can better support you in your sexuality and also with your spiritual journey. So the link between sex and spirit has become really clear to me over the last 2.5 years of doing this show. And I hope that you have been growing with me. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, please, I love to hear from you. And I also love to hear your suggestions on what kind of other guests that I should include. I've been having different kinds of guests who are sex therapists, sex counselors, sex educators, sex workers, tantrikas, people who practice BDSM, bondage domination, some sadomasochism, people who play with pain, pleasure, sensation, energy, tantrikas, like I mentioned. So yes, I've had different kinds of guests with different kinds of backgrounds, and so I love to hear from you. Who else can I have on the show? So yes, this is a wrap, and have a great week ahead, and I look forward to you following us next week. Goodbye, and have a great week ahead.